Have you guys ever tried to optimize your life using just cold, hard data? Like, you look at a dating app and you filter by the exact metrics that should mathematically guarantee a perfect match. 6 feet tall, good job, reads books, loves dogs. On paper, it is a flawless, objectively superior candidate. You go on the date, you sit down, and within 5 minutes, you realize they have the personality of wet cardboard, and you'd rather be having dinner with a feral raccoon. The numbers were perfect. The reality was a disaster. Alright, switching gears today, no more of that. Let's talk about the most lethal weapon of the Middle Ages. Because that exact same illusion, the trap of the perfect on paper option, is exactly what happened to the greatest killing machine of the medieval world, the English longbow. Look at the raw data. Stack the English longbow up against the early firearms of the 15th and 16th centuries weapons like the matchlock arquebus or early muskets. It's not even a competition. It is an absolute humiliating blowout. A trained longbowman could lose 10 to 12 aimed arrows in a single minute. A guy with an early musket, if he was lucky, if the wind was right, if he didn't accidentally blow his own fingers off, he could manage maybe 1 or 2 shots in that same minute. Range? The longbow could accurately drop a devastating volley on targets over 250 yards away. The early musket was practically a coin toss at 50 yards. Reliability. A longbow is a stick and a string. It works in the cold. It works in the mud. An early firearm was a complicated metal tube relying on a literal burning rope, the match being plunged into an open pan of black powder. If it started raining, your gun was now just a really expensive, really heavy metal club. The brain shuts down like a tripped circuit breaker trying to comprehend why anyone would switch. So, how did they know to abandon it? Why would an entire continent look at an objectively superior, rapid-fire, high-arc sniper rifle and trade it in for a heavy, inaccurate, unreliable metal tube that took a minute to reload? And why does this historical blunder perfectly explain how modern industries still operate today? Buckle up, because the answer isn't about which weapon was deadlier. It's about biology, economics, and a terrified government realizing they were running out of mutants. To understand how wild this downgrade was, we have to look at what the longbow actually did at its peak. Let's go to 1415. The Battle of Agincourt. This is the worst Tuesday in French military history. King Henry VIII of England is trapped, exhausted, and massively outnumbered by the French nobility. The French have heavy cavalry, steel armor, and numbers. The English have thousands of guys with longbows. Now, when I say long, I'm not talking about the fiberglass toy you used at summer camp. I'm talking about a 6-foot piece of yew wood with a draw weight of up to 150 pounds. That's the equivalent of doing a 1-arm row with a full-grown Rottweiler 12 times a minute. When the French charged through the mud, the sky literally went dark. We are talking about tens of thousands of arrows raining down every 60 seconds. Bodkin point arrows, tipped with hardened steel, hitting with the kinetic energy of a modern handgun. They didn't just pierce armor, they punched through the unarmored horses, shattered morale, and created a devastating, inescapable kill zone. The longbow wasn't just a weapon, it was an area denial artillery system operated by foot soldiers. So, again, the math. 10 shots to 1. Longer range. Unaffected by weather. Why did it die? Here is where it gets nasty. The first compounding cause that killed the longbow wasn't on the battlefield. It was in the human skeleton. In 1971, marine archaeologists discovered the wreck of the Mary Rose, a warship of King Henry VIII that sank in 1545. When they raised it, they found the remains of hundreds of crewmen, including the ship's complement of master archers. A biological anthropologist named Aja Sterling studied these skeletons, and what she found was absolute horror. These guys were biologically deformed. You see, to draw a 150-pound bow in the chaos of battle, you can't just hit the gym for a few months. You have to start when you are a child. The English had laws requiring every boy to practice archery on Sundays starting at age 7. As these kids grew, the massive, repetitive biomechanical stress of pulling that bow actually reshaped their bones. Sterling found that the skeletons of these archers had radically asymmetrical arms. The bones in their left arms, the bow arms, were significantly thicker and denser than their right. Their spines were twisted. The cartilage in their shoulders was completely worn away. They suffered from a condition called ossicromial, where the shoulder blade literally pulls itself apart under the intense mechanical strain and never fuses properly. Yeah, let that sink in. The longbow was so powerful that it required the state to systematically deform the skeletal structure of its male population over a period of 10 years just to produce a single viable soldier. You don't just pick up a longbow. You have to be genetically and biomechanically molded around it from childhood. Now, contrast that with the musket. How long does it take to train a guy to use an early firearm? About 2 weeks. You take a starving peasant, hand him a metal tube, tell him, point this end at the guy on the horse, keep the burning rope away from your face, and pull this lever. Boom! You have a lethal soldier. This brings us to the second cause, the brutal economics of scale. By the 16th century, Europe is changing. States are getting bigger, armies are massive. If an English king loses 1,000 longbowmen in a single battle, he can't replace them. It takes a decade to grow a new batch of biomechanically altered super archers. If a French king loses 1,000 arquebusiers, he just buys 1,000 more guns and grabs 1,000 peasants from the fields. The early modern state couldn't afford to enforce a lifetime of grueling physical training anymore. The musket wasn't adopted because it was a better weapon. It was adopted because it was a scalable weapon. The hardware was expensive, sure, but the software, the human operator, was entirely disposable and infinitely replaceable. Charming, right? But wait, it wasn't just about training. Let's talk about the hard science of armor. Because nothing says advanced civilization like trying to figure out how to put a piece of metal through another guy's chest. Over in Italy and Germany, metallurgy was rapidly advancing. Armor was transitioning from mail to full plate harness. We are talking about curved, heat-treated steel designed specifically to deflect incoming projectiles. Modern ballistics researchers, like Dr. Alan Williams in his exhaustive study The Night and the Blast Furnace, have run the numbers on this. An arrow from a 150-pound longbow carries roughly 100 to 120 joules of kinetic energy. Against early mail or low-quality iron, that's lethal. But against 15th-century tempered steel plate, the arrow just bounces off. The geometry of the breastplate deflects the bodkin point. Sure, you can still hit a horse, or find a gap in the visor, but the sheer stopping power is gone. Now look at the early firearms. An early musket might be wildly inaccurate, but it fired a heavy lead ball that carried upwards of 1,000 to 2,000 joules of kinetic energy. That is an exponential leap in raw physics. Even if the lead ball didn't penetrate the steel plate, which it often did, the blunt force trauma alone was enough to shatter ribs and cause massive internal bleeding beneath the armor. The brain shuts down like a trip circuit breaker when a musket ball hits you. The arrow was a precision instrument relying on muscle. The bullet was a sledgehammer relying on chemistry. So now, the English government is panicking. They have laws on the books from the 1500s where the crown is literally begging people to keep practicing the longbow. Henry VIII passed statutes making it illegal to play tennis, bowls, or dice, because men were slacking off on their archery practice. People didn't want to spend their one day off permanently destroying their shoulder joints. They wanted to go to the pub. They wanted to play early football. Cultural reclassification was setting in. Archery was becoming a sport, a nostalgic pastime, not the bleeding edge of military tech. The infrastructure of the entire society was shifting. You stack it all up. The biological fragility of the archers, the economic reality of mass armies, the metallurgical advances in plate armor, the sheer chemical kinetic energy of gunpowder. The longbow lost because the ecosystem around it changed. It was an objectively superior weapon that belonged to an objectively unsustainable system. We see the same pattern today, don't we? The best, most efficient, most beautiful system loses to the clunky, annoying, but infinitely scalable one. It's why you type on a QWERTY keyboard and inherently inefficient layout designed to slow down mechanical typewriters so the keys wouldn't jam instead of the mathematically superior Dvorak layout. It's why fast food wiped out local diners. It's why a company will adopt a software program that crashes twice a week, but is easy to onboard new employees with, rather than a perfect, custom-built system that requires a PAAHDAADDDDHEHE to operate. The math hasn't changed. The longbow was faster, more accurate, and deadlier in the hands of a master, but reality doesn't care about the peak performance of a master. Reality cares about what you can hand to a million idiots and still get the job done. So next time you guys are frustrated because a company, a government, or an industry makes a decision that seems objectively stupid on paper, remember the skeletons on the merry rows. The best option only wins if the entire world is willing to bend itself around it. And usually, people just want to take the easy way out. I'm curious what you guys think. What's a modern piece of technology or a system you use every day that you know is objectively worse than the alternative, but we're all just stuck with it? Drop your take in the comments below, hit subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one.